Hi everyone, in this video we will be talking about CSS selectors. Here, if we know, right, if we have to add any CSS on any of our HTML elements, we need selectors. Like suppose if I have an h1 tag and here I am saying learning CSS, right? And now if I have to apply any CSS class to this, how will I write? I will say h1 tag and I am saying like make it as blue, right? So this is a selector. So this is called a selector. This is a element selector. Basically what you are saying here is you are selecting any HTML element from here. So this is a element selector. So this thing, whatever I have used, this is used for adding comments inside CSS files. That means this will not be processed. This is a comment which is for us to understand and read the page. So you have to put / and you can write anything. So this is an element selector. H1 is an element selector. You're selecting any element and you're changing the CSS property of that element. So one type of selector is element selector. Like suppose again if you have a paragraph and you have some random text inside this paragraph. Now again, right, if you have to change the color or anything of this paragraph, let's change the color to green. So this is again a HTML, this is again a element selector. So here if you see, this is an element selector like this, right? So if we go and check our files, so we know, right, this is blue color and this is green color. To add this CSS to these HTML files, what we have done, we have selected these elements. So this is called as element selector. Now there are other types of selectors as well. Apart from directly using the elements, you have other selectors also. For now, to each and any element on your web page, you can also provide ID. So ID is equals to, ID is like you're giving a name to someone, right? Like this is my ID, this is my unique roll number, you can say. If you're studying in a school or college, you get a roll number, right? Same way you're adding an ID here. Now to each element, with each element you have an ID. So let's say I'm saying this is a ID heading. Okay, so this ID belongs to this h1 element. Same way, if suppose you have multiple h1 elements, right? So this is heading. And here also you can provide any roll number to this, basically any ID to this element. So this is heading and this is heading 2. So let me name it heading 1. So we have given IDs to these elements. Means with ID you can uniquely identify any element. If you have given ID to any element, you can uniquely identify that element using this ID. Okay, so it's like you should never give same ID to multiple elements. So one ID should be given only to one element. Now you can add CSS class using these IDs also. Like here, if you see, to give any class using ID selector, you have to give hash sign and whatever ID you have given. You have given the name of ID as heading 1. So you can write it like this. That means you are saying whatever class you have to apply, you are applying on this heading 1. Here you can say, let's say color of this heading I want as, let's say, brown. Okay, like this. So that means on this heading 1. So now you have two selectors. This selector is called as ID selector. This is called as ID selector. Okay, and this is an element selector. Now what you have done, you are saying that h1 to h1 tag you are applying the color as blue, but to adding one ID you are applying the color as brown. And here if you go inside and see, this element has h1 element. So with h1 element I am saying applying the color to blue, and with this ID I am saying applying the color brown. So which color it will apply? So ID has more priority than element selector. So if you are saying heading 1 should be color brown, so this will change to color brown. But if you are saying h1 tag has color blue, so the below one, right, this one will be blue. So here if you see, this is blue and this is brown. So priority of ID is more than element. So if you have given any ID to any element, then whatever class or whatever CSS you have applied to that ID will be applied on that element. Okay, so there is one type of selector is element selector. Another type is ID selector. ID selector, you have to apply any ID using hash, right? Here, if you have heading 2, suppose you want to apply any class or any CSS to heading 2. So you will say hash heading 2 like this, and you can say color of this is red. So this below one will become red now, and this element selector will not be applied. So according to the use case, you will have to decide if you have to use an ID or an element directly to apply CSS. Third type of selector is the class selector. Now suppose I wanted that this particular blue color should be applied to this h1 tag also and to this paragraph also. Or there are multiple elements on the page, and on this page I want to apply one class on this multiple elements, right? So if I give unique IDs, then I will have to put on every ID, I will have to apply the class, right? So it's better if I give a class, right? Suppose whenever you are in a college also, you are all in a class. So when you are in a class, there are some similar properties of one section. Similarly, if I am saying that, so I can write a class. So you can, similar to heading, you can also provide, similar to ID, you can also provide classes. So to apply a class, you will have to write it like this. Class is equals to, and you can name it anything. Okay, so you can name it anything. Let me name it as para. Suppose I am just naming it like this. And suppose instead of ID, I am providing a class here, and this class is also same. So one class can be applied to multiple elements, right? One class can be applied to multiple elements. So here you have applied the class para to this h1 tag and to this paragraph. Now when you go back, right, you can have third type of selector, which is class selector. That means you are applying CSS using class names. In that case, you will have to use dot. Instead of hash, you will have to use dot and class name like this. And here, if I want to say I am applying the color as blue violet, okay, like this. So whenever you are applying any classes, any CSS using class, you will have to use this dot. So this is what our class selector. Okay, so this is class selector. So now if you see these two tags, right, h1 and p, which is having this class, they should have this violet color, right? So these are the different types of selectors which you can decide accordingly and use to apply CSS on your HTML pages. Apart from these selectors, we also have one more selector, which is universal selector. Now what is this universal selector? So we have one selector, which is universal selector. Universal selector means if you have an asterisk sign, so this is called as asterisk. Okay, so this applies to all the elements on the page. So this applies to all the elements on the page. If you are applying any property using asterisk, that means all the elements on the page will have that property. So here you can say color as yellow, let's say, or yellow green. Okay, but currently, see, this is having least priority. If suppose you have applied asterisk sign color yellow green, so all the elements will turn yellow green. But if you have already applied some other classes to them, so they will override. They will have more priority. So this is the basic one. Like if no other class is applied on any element, no other CSS is applied, then it will apply this color. Suppose if I comment these all out, right, for now, if I comment these all out, or let me just remove them. Okay, let's check this. So now you know that by default color of every element inside HTML is black. Now here I have said this is the asterisk, and here I am saying color is yellow green. Now if you see, all this color has changed to yellow green, right? So now what we can do? So this is the asterisk. So whenever you put any properties inside asterisk, it will be applied to every element. But you can override those elements. You can override the properties inside that element using these individual selectors. You can use element selectors to select any particular type of element. See, if you have selected H1, that means in your web page, all H1 tags will have same property. So But suppose you want only one h1 tag to have this, or you want that all can have this, but my one h1 tag should not have this color. In that case, what you will do? You will either provide a class or a heading to that h1 tag. And when you provide a heading to that h1 tag, you can change the individual color. So element selector will be applied to all the elements on that page. Same element. Unique, ID is unique. So if you want only one single property to change, you can put this ID, like this ID, and you can add a color, or you can add any property. Or you can use classes. If you want to apply same CSS classes to multiple elements, you can use class. So for selecting these selectors, for ID selector, you have a hashtag. For class, you have a dot. And for otherwise, this is for asterisk is for universal, and this is for element. We will be using these selectors very frequently in the coming videos. Okay, so it will be more clear and more understandable how we are applying CSS, to our HTML elements using these multiple selectors. Okay, so I hope this is clear to you, and I'll see you in the coming video. Bye bye.
Bye.